See this, folks? By the way, good afternoon. Chuck Martin, CGM3 Productions. How are you on this fine Monday, July 13th, 2026? This is being recorded in the morning or in the mid afternoon right now. And, kind of taking a break of this. And as I back it out slowly. Hi there. hmm Good talk about a little bit about this today because obviously it's an anniversary, a music celebration, everything. And really, this is like this, I'm going to turn on the other side and I'll put it down and give this and look at this. Oh my gosh. If we go like this up here and then move it up. Yep. This is absolutely a musical dream for most of us. Obviously, I'm glad I get to celebrate another day like this. Obviously, it's round 32. I finished up with the bye week. And so, what am I going to be doing today? It's July 13th. And I kind of looked at my memories and whatnot. And I should have done this last year because it was the 40th anniversary. Who would ever thought about it? 40 years. So, technically, this is going to be number 80 on the entry. So, 80, gosh, wow, 80, 80 entries. But it was absolutely a magical time. Now, keep this in mind. Our parents' generation, it was Woodstock. It was 3 days of peace, love, and music. Seeing it everything else, including right now with the 20th anniversary of Bethel Woods Performing Arts Center. And 20 years of that, it's like that's crazy, or that's incredible, Because keep this in mind, 20 years ago, I was living out in California. It was like the second year I was out there, and it was absolutely, a trip, with it, it was absolutely amazing. I can't believe that's been that long. But years and years ago, when I was out in California, I came across obviously this amazing DVD box set, and it's, the entire concert in its entirety. Now, how did this start? It started 2 years prior, back in the holidays, like late November 1984, with a band called Band Aid. And Band Aid was basically um, a mix of progressive rock, pop, pop, synth pop, progressive pop, or progressive rock as well. And behind the brilliant mind of Sir Midge of Ultravox and the amazing Sir Bob Geldof of the Boomtown Rats. And how they created this monumental show. And put it this way, I kind of said it, recently in my other posts, is this is our generation's Woodstock with a purpose. Because what right now, back in the day, 41 years ago, it's still happening right now. It's world hunger. It is definitely, wars are out there right now. What's happening? It is everything, you know, how can we as a human race come together and merge everything together in one way for peace, for, you know, feeding, to educate and make it, make things happen, you know. So it was one of those, huge things. And keep this in mind, from one little simple song from Band Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas? And I fell in love with that Christmas song. That's really one of my favorite holiday, tunes. But you have to go to the extended version with it. Obviously, did everything, and then obviously right in the middle, you had every artist from Frankie Goes to Hollywood to David Bowie to Spandau Spandau Ballet, Big Country, Bananarama, Phil Collins on the drums. The entire, the list was going on for that side of the pond. Now, It was absolutely amazing. Now here, in 1985, and obviously it's like 41 years ago with that, right after the American Music Awards, a group called USA for Africa came up with their song. So here's all the pop icons of the day: Cyndi Lauper, Huey Lewis and the News, um, George Benson, Michael Jackson, um, all the icons back in the day, back in our pop stars. Even some of these names, kind of escape me right now, but take a look online on both songs and research it. Give it better research, because guaranteed some of these artists, they're coming out, you know, of you know of how this magic happened. So that was basically with a purpose and with the determination to eradicate hunger in Africa, especially in Ethiopia. And you saw the pictures, the horrifying pictures of what's going on. And keep in mind, there was like many wars and whatnot. But now at a global scale, right now in 2026 now, we're still battling with hunger, with you know, with these skirmishes and whatnot. And obviously 250 years of celebration of America, of United States, with becoming an independent republic, independent nation. Yet I don't want to go off track here, but in the main case, like this was absolutely amazing. Now, recalling that, with the songs, and then they started to come up with an idea. Let's have a major concert sometime in the summer months, and in two locations. One in Wembley, which kicked it off, Wembley in London, and then the other place, good old RFK Stadium in Philadelphia. Now, they started off the performances, and then obviously, you know, because of the time differences, it was basically they started off, and with waking up, and then they started getting certain acts together. They started with it. You started to see the monarch. The introducing of the monarch, and then obviously Bob Geldof, and his his top tunes. And keep this in mind, back in the day it was considered, you can say alternative rock, but it's basically progressive rock in the United States. Now we coin that, um, or synth pop, you know, um, and it was absolutely the beginning of that. And then here we go, like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning here in the United States, in RFK, we did it. So we connected by a satellite up there, going back and forth, bouncing back and forth, and seeing how everything. And it's like, make sure you donate and whatnot. And again, that was with a purpose, and it's to creating awareness, to you know give a little, whether it's like with the local food bank here. And I see that growing and growing exponentially, and it's absolutely amazing. So here I am, back in 1985, during the middle of the day, and I knew about the concert, because MTV was broadcasting. Yes, cable stations at MTV. Who would have known? MTV. Oh my gosh, here we are. And then here's like the simulcasting from WNEW to WPDH. Hint, hint, wink, wink. When they were 10 years back in the day, here it is right now, 50 years. 50 years later. They were broadcasting, simulcasting it. It was an absolute adventure. Now here me in the hot sun, cutting the grass, and I had all speakers directed out, even on the bottom. I wanted to check out this concert. Absolutely amazing. It was absolutely, you got to hear it and like, oh yeah, this is great, great, great. And it really fine-tuned where my direction was going with it. Now keep in mind, at this time, I mean, obviously Breakfast Club came out, some of these top movies, and then you got to see the bands providing, like, "But Don't You Forget About Me" from Simple Minds, bam, I was hooked. Um, you know, and I settled in watching, again, downstairs, settling in, watching on the big, big tube, the big television, locking it on to, MTV and watching the entire, with it. And it was basically a news event, mainly in history, and we call it Live Aid Day for July 13th, specifically for that. So, I mean, I missed probably earlier, early in the sessions, but I did pick up during the course of the day, between England and, Philadelphia. And then I started to hear really fantastic music, classic 1980 style, and then bringing back the reemergence of some of the bands like the Rolling Stones. And I do believe Ozzy was there with Black Sabbath. Um, don't think Def Leppard was there, but I'm not sure. I got to go through the list, but you probably see that. Um, but picking up on the modern day, The Who, obviously, The Who with Roger Daltrey. Who would ever think about the legends coming to do something so massive? But here, lo and behold, you had the modern day rock and rollers. You had Queen. Thank you, thank you, Freddie. You know, his style. His set with it. Everybody was talking about Bohemian Rhapsody, um, Hammer to Fall, obviously Lady Gaga, and it's like you going like this, like that. You felt involved. You felt that presence there. It was absolutely amazing, and it just pumped me up a little bit more. And then here's the other artists like David Bowie, the late great David Bowie from Ziggy Stardust, and then here's the Thin Duke himself, with his matter of hits. And one of those hits what really got me very much, is Heroes. We can be heroes for just one day. It's still, it's that mindset. It was absolutely phenomenal. And that energy was building up, building up. And then obviously we heard about Sting, you know, Sting doing his little numbers. Phil Collins, and who couldn't forget this? Phil Collins doing a set in Wembley, flying on and over with the super jet, going to RFK and being there for in the United States. That's what pure entertainment's all about. And doing both sides of the continent. It's like this was you know, quite amazing. It was absolutely um, extravagant, excellent, with it. And the artists, and I keep reminding about the artists. I mean, yes, we named Queen, we named them, David Bowie, we named, different part of, but really, I got a little bit more to a little bit enjoy. Again, I was hooked on Simple Minds that day. So thank you to Jim Kerr and the boys. And here's a little bit more of the tracks like Ghost Dancing and these other events, and then obviously with Simple Minds, obviously with Don't You Forget About Me. And then here's like the Pretenders with Chrissy Hind, with playing on the side of the continent. And here's Middle of the Road and seeing her jamming with the harmonica, and the dress and everything else. And then there's Madonna with Holiday, kind of get everything flowing together and having a good time. And then Rolling Stones, obviously Mick Jagger obviously, and then obviously he did a video with David Bowie with a classic with Dancing in the Streets, but seeing them performing it live, with Tina Turner, the late great Tina Turner with State of Shock, and I'm like, yo, oh, you could see the energy, you could see that going. Um, and then over in Wembley, over there, um, which I really love this band to this day. You too, Bono. His presence, his magic. The band playing. Um, you know, I think he did Pride in the Name of Love, but one track that really got me the most was Bad. Yeah, the song is called Bad. Full. And then he did, doing this, doing that, and then putting a little bit of Lou Reed in there or Rolling Stones in there. And it just the magic was happening. And you look how young they were. Look how young these guys were. And we lived at a great time. We saw our rock heroes. We saw our progressive heroes. We saw anything that was very much alternate. Even Duran Duran. Oh my goodness, Duran Duran obviously being there, it was absolutely they're just coming out with this thing, Spandau Ballet, and there was a few others like this. Even the Boomtown Rats. I Hate Mondays. You know, Legacy with it. Um, Midge, obviously Ultravox, and it was just a really phenomenal day. And then wrapping up over in Wembley, you had Paul McCartney singing, wrapping it up, Let It Be. It was absolutely magical. It was, having Paul McCartney on the Wembley stage to wrap it up, and here we are. We're keeping the concert up in the United States. And here's like the Cars with Rick Ocasek. Um, and keep in mind these guys were so young. We were living in our own modern day of Woodstock with a purpose, and it was absolutely magnificent. So I gotta tell you, and actually, besides this video, if you go on to um, the making of Bohemian Rhapsody, and they nailed it. Let me tell you something. They nailed it from the beginning of how the band coming all the way to Live Aid, and just seeing it flourished, and it just the movement was absolutely, really, truly a magical time. It was really, truly a moment for us to say, man, I would like to go back to 1985 again and just relive that moment and just watch it over. Well, I mean, I'll be able to watch this a little later because I'm going to be turning that on in a little bit. So, but even on the video side, but it was basically simulcasting on radio. And thank you to WPDH, thank you to WNEW back in the day, and doing this thing. So if there's something that I missed, or there was something that was cut corner, there's always like the behind the scenes thing, and it's just it flourished. It was a magical moment between the two places. So even Eric Clapton of all, here's Eric Clapton playing, some of the classics, and it's like, wow, the energy, the finesse, where everybody was rocking it out and just having a great time, and doing something that's mainly, again, with a purpose and the initiative, a mission to really combine every forces to this thing. So that day was really a breathtaking day, 41 years ago, in the little town on the top of the hill, and just listening to my Woodstock, which is Generation X's Woodstock. Just an amazing occurrence, and it just an amazing. You never get to see that. Sure, there's been like anniversaries of the concert and whatnot, and the re-emergence and recreating the song, but with different artists, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but it was but you stick it to the natural. I rather stick with the classics, and carrying it on. It's just that it's just an amazing thing. So as as I said before on another video that I just did recently, um, music can heal in many which ways, and it brings that joy, the joy and the prosperity with it. So I hope you got to enjoy this. And for my, the parents, the grandparents, great grandparents who have seen it, I hope you enjoyed it like I have. And it's just an amazing, amazing spectacle. So, and by the way, 20 years ago, I found this at a legendary music store out there called Tower Records. Yes, Sacramento had Tower Records, and they were playing. Obviously, they were playing it on you know NPR, not NPR, but it's CPBs, like Channel 13, WNET. Well, Sacramento had theirs thing, and then they're replaying the concert. I'm like, this was absolutely amazing. So it was great just getting it and just finding this in Sacramento, California. So kudos to that, and the rest is history. So again, a very happy 41st anniversary to Live Aid. And again, if I can see it up close, the day the music changed the world. The day the music changed the world, right here. So otherwise, here we are in 2026. Bethel Woods celebrating their 20th. And obviously, there's been artists coming around, no problem. But I just can't wait. There's going to be some major coming, major concerts coming. I can't say it, but I'm just excited in one way or another. So, anyway, have a great day. This is Chuck Martin from CGM3 Productions. And again, wishing, again, happy 41st anniversary, Live Aid. Love you. Peace, love, and to our generation's Woodstock. This is it. You take care. Peace, love. We'll catch you later on.